A new podcast, this time on what I call the Wandering Bordeaux Gourmet. The Celts wander. We also do epic quests, but this is about wandering, accidental discoveries of really, really interesting, fun places to eat, and often in unexpected places. One place will be Cardiff in this journey, another will be in Liverpool, which I had a very interesting experience in. So, now, background. Why, well, if the wandering thing is understandable, why the Bordeaux and why the gourmet? How does one become a gourmet if one wants to? And why Bordeaux? Although the association with Bordeaux and gourmet is baseball in Brooklyn. So, my experience of food cultures, and I know food cultures is a fighting word for some people. And in the States, even though the States, in my view, certain places accepted, New Orleans, Manhattan in part, they're food cultures. The rest of it, this is a debatable notion, although there is quality dining, fine dining to be had in most remarkable places all over the country, because there are some really, really good, excellent restaurants, and California is wine country to first start. So the ingredients are there, but it's not a food culture. And there are some Italian comparisons to explain why the United States is not a food culture, in the sense that, for example, the south of Italy or Bordeaux are food cultures. Now, how does one discover a food culture? And it's because you experience one. And my experience did not, coming from Los Angeles, which is not a food culture, in my experience, it was when I began to travel. Spent a summer in French Canada, Quebec, and had some, first of all, I had strawberries. They were in season, extraordinary strawberries. I had never tasted strawberries. Like, I was born in a strawberry producing area of Southern California, but this is something else. Then, much more instructive, I went to a cheese bistro in Montreal, with a group of fellow exchange students, shall we call them, and it was, this only thing on the menu was cheese, and so we ordered cheese pie. Oh my gosh, it completely transformed my relationship with cheese. So as a consequence of that, one branched out, one continued the journey. Where did it take me? Japan. Japan is a food culture. The Japanese, not everybody, but there is a very strong culinary tradition there of excellence. And it's my favorite form of Asian food, actually. I spent 25 years there, it would be, but I thought it was outstanding, and it changed me. Then, from there, back to Europe, and I ended up, Britain and Wales and Ireland are not food cultures. Sorry, they aren't. I guess the way to put this in perspective is the very famous BBC interview with a Spanish tomato farmer, who, a rather surly BBC journalist, said, why are Spanish tomatoes in Britain so tasteless? And the Spanish farmer looked up at him and said, well, we send you not the pick of the crop. And this journalist said, why is that? And he says, in Spanish, can I be honest with you? And the Brits said, well, go ahead. And the guy said, we know you don't care. Now that's a definition of a non-food culture, not caring. So after Japan and a lot of visits to Italy, I ended up in France, in Bordeaux. And Bordeaux, in my view, is the food capital of the country. Nowhere have I been where more people, ordinary and otherwise, take food so seriously. It is the main topic of conversation. Almost everybody has an interest in it. And they know how to eat, how to enjoy it, and they compare, and we talk about recipes, and on it goes. This is our deal. This is what the Bordelais do. Hence, the notion of being a wandering Bordeaux gourmet. Now, to put this in perspective, just even in French terms, there's a story I've told against with myself on other occasions that had a very successful student who invited me to Paris to have a first-class meal, among other things. And we ended up going, it was a restaurant off the Champs-Élysées, 3 stars, I think. Exceptional. It's probably the most expensive restaurant I've ever been to, and maybe the most expensive restaurant I ever go to. Nevertheless, extraordinary evening. And at this gathering, for reasons, accidental reasons, I was the only French speaker at the table. And the French staff got around me and he said, "What are you hoping for good things?" And of course I was hoping for good things. Outstanding restaurant, wonderful reputation. And then I paused and the guy said, "Oh, what?" And I said, "I'm sure the food here will be almost as good as the food in Bordeaux." Paul settled over the whole restaurant. Now that's the way we are about it. It isn't arrogant, we're just confident. We do this. Now, to put this in perspective, in Italian perspective, because this goes back to where this whole game began. Where did this game begin? When I was a child, about 10, it was the family tradition to rotate between different families in the family, the hosting of the great feasts of the year: Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Easter. And it was the turn of my Welsh-speaking auntie. Her mother was Welsh-born and Welsh-speaking almost exclusively, so that my father's family is from Wales, so that was all part of the picture. But anyway, I thought she did a really good job, the turkey and all that. And I went into the kitchen to congratulate her, and she said, "Well, thank you very much, but actually, what I served was not really food. It certainly wasn't cuisine." And I said, "Explain." And she said, "Cuisine is Italian." Now, she had been married to an Italian man, and Italian men of that generation did not cook, but their mothers did. And my auntie had learned from her stepmother, her mother-in-law, sorry, that this is how you do it. I never got Aunt Luella to cook me Italian, which I'm really sorry about, but she planted the seed. And from that, the adventure of looking for cuisine began. I go to Italy. This goes back to our business about food cultures. I'm very fond of Milan. I like going to the opera in Milan, but Milan is not the food culture that you find in the south of Italy. All my in-laws, for accidental occupational reasons, they were Sicilian miners, and my family was miners from Wales, who dug gold in the New World, and Sicilian miners who dug coal in Sicily, who ended up digging gold in Colorado. That's because all my in-laws ended up being Italians. And there was a standard there, obviously. But Milan is not quite a food culture. I mean, they have wonderful restaurants. And the Milanese would be quite cross with me by hearing this, but Milanese are too busy making money to be focused on food in the way that Neapolitans are, or Ragusa in Sicily is. These are food capitals. These are places where food is the deal. And as a consequence, you're formed by it. So, and relatedly, just to put it in the side text about alcohol, in Bordeaux, because just to the south of us is Armagnac country, and Armagnac's a kind of, it's like cognac, only rougher. The production size, the amount of production to the farms that produce it, the wineries that produce it are small, and doesn't have the marketing force of cognac. But I prefer Armagnac. And when I learned my preference, I went and bought Armagnac, and I went to a local place that sold these sorts of things. And the guy said, "We'll start you off with 20-year-old Armagnac, and then next time you come in, we'll do 25, and then if you can cope with the expense, we'll go to 35. And I said, "You're telling me something." She says, "Yes, I am. I'm telling you about a very important Bordeaux idea." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "The corruption of taste. As you go up in quality, you can't go down again. You'll notice. With food and alcohol, it's the same. The more you taste really, really good, and you have any kind of palate at all, up you go. And one of the nice things about all of this is even you get old, like I'm old, my palate's still very responsive to differences in quality. So there we go. Now, hence the business about Bordeaux. So what is this playlist about? This playlist is about finding little culinary gems in unexpected places. And two of the places we're going to talk about, one of them is Cardiff, where I live, and I've just recently found a really good Sicilian bistro, shall I call it. And the second place was a chance discovery of a really good Italian restaurant in Liverpool. And I had fondness for Liverpool, but that's another story. So, Beatles Country, all that. So we'll talk about those things in subsequent podcasts. But this is the picture. This is what I mean by food culture. This is where I propose to take you. And if you're interested, come with me.